Щедрик. It has become a true symbol of Christmas. It was performed in the world's best concert halls. The popular Christmas song, Carol of the Bells, the song without which it would be hard to imagine Christmas as such. These four notes that can be easily recognized by almost anyone bring closer together different parts of the world, from the North Pole to Antarctica, from Australia to Alaska. However, it is little known that even though the carol's famous lyrics were written by the popular American conductor Peter Wilhousky, the author of its music was a Ukrainian conductor and composer, a true genius, Mykola Leontovich. And it was an ancient Ukrainian New Year's folk song called Щедрик that became the foundation of this masterpiece. Centuries ago, Ukrainians considered spring the beginning of a new year. That's why the folk lyrics of the song mention swallows, the heralds of the season. Within 100 years, the Ukrainian song has spread all over the world, turning into an unofficial anthem of Christmas. But before that, Щедрик had gone a long way, becoming a symbol of the Ukrainian fight for independence from Russia. The year is 1919. The First World War has just ended. At the Paris Peace Conference, the victorious countries were trying to create a new world order. In his famous 14 points, the American President Woodrow Wilson affirmed the inalienable right of peoples to self-determination. In the background of these epoch-making events, the Baltic states, South Caucasus, Poland, Czechia, Finland, Ukraine, and other states received hope for a just post-war solution to their national aspirations. The Ukrainian National Republic, which was literally rising from the ashes, declared its independence. Your parents' old dream has come true. From now on, the Ukrainian National Republic becomes independent from everyone, the free sovereign state of Ukrainian people. But the major countries in Europe and America did not share the enthusiasm of Ukrainians. And that was exploited by the proficient Russian propaganda machine that was trying hard to convince the world that Ukraine didn't exist. And until Lenin's political descendants credited him with the invention of the country, the Russian ministers at the time were claiming that Ukraine was devised by the Austrian General Staff. Not willing to recognize Ukraine's independence, Soviet Russia started a full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Not only the eastern regions of Ukraine were soon occupied, but also the capital, Kyiv. On the eve of the invasion, Simon Petliura, Ukraine's leader at the time, sent a choir on a cultural quest to Europe. Just as in today's events, while struggling to match the military power of the opponent, Ukraine realized that the only chance to survive as a country is to win the information war and to recruit the countries of Europe to support Ukraine. So, while realizing the significance of the threat, Simon Petliura began to look for ways to remind the world that Ukraine had not only existed for a long time, but it had also done so separately from Russia. It's not a common fact that Petliura, just as Volodymyr Zelensky many years after him, had an artistic background. Before the war, the head of state and commander-in-chief of the Ukrainian army was an art critic, theater reviewer, and columnist for theater premieres. Therefore, it was decided that one of the directions of the Ukrainian cultural diplomacy should be the most universal medium of all, capable of crossing any borders, the music. Simon Petliura summoned a composer and conductor, Alexander Korshets, and ordered him to gather a choir within a week. Practically a talent show was organized to find the best choirists. Against the will of its creator, the Щедрик song also made its way into the choir's repertoire. Why against the will? Well, the composer Mykola Leontovich was very hard on himself. A humble music teacher from Tulchin, a small town in the Podillia region, Leontovich destroyed many of his scores and worked on Щедрик's melodical part for 10 years. And yet, the song set off around the world like a swallow. The first triumphant concert of the Ukrainian Republican Choir took place on May 11, 1919, in the capital of Czechoslovakia, Prague. Along with Щедрик, the choir performed other pieces by Mykola Lysenko, Kyrylo Stetsenko, and Alexander Korshets, the choir's very conductor. But all listeners, from Vienna to Brussels, from Barcelona to Paris, were in love with the Щедрик carol. Щедрик is one of the most beautiful songs of the program. The London magazine The Punch wrote, "A masterpiece of folk art." A columnist of the Brussels newspaper, Le 20e siècle, admired the carol. In Vienna, the media summarized, Ukraine's cultural maturity must legitimize its political independence for the world. Simon Petliura's strategy worked. In the following years, the Ukrainian choir kept gathering queens, presidents, ministers, academics, and professors in concert halls. The Ukrainian choir visited 10 countries, gave more than 200 concerts, and caused a real boom. Shtadrik was translated into many different languages. Across concert halls, audiences were chanting, "Long live Ukraine!" There were more than 500,000 reviews in 10 different languages about Ukraine and Ukrainian music. This was the result of the European tour of the choir. Hundreds of foreign artists, politicians, and public figures were sending letters to the choir in support of Ukrainian cultural and political agency. Meanwhile, a real catastrophe was taking place in the homeland of Shtadrik. While the Ukrainian National Republic was winning on the cultural front, its military attempts to force back thousands of Bolsheviks and the armies of the Whites, who tried to restore the Russian Empire, failed completely. Despite all hopes, the military support to Ukraine was not provided, and for the next 70 years, the country became occupied by Soviet Russia. The political repression started. Murders of Ukrainian intelligentsia were branded as purges of those who disagreed with the regime. Simon Petliura suffered a similar fate. He was killed in the middle of a street in Paris. In 1921, Mykola Leontovich was also killed by an agent of the All-Russian Extraordinary Commission. Leontovich's music was declared as irrelevant for the Soviet reality, and the memory of the composer faded for many decades. But Alexander Koshich's choir continued to live, and so did Shtadrik. In 1922, the choir reached the Western Hemisphere. And not just some place, but the most prestigious concert venue, Carnegie Hall. That same night, for the first time ever, Americans heard the melody of their future favorite Christmas hit. What followed next were concerts in more than 100 American cities. Everywhere, Shtadrik was the encore. As in Europe, Leontovich's carol is not only a tour hit, but also a symbol of the Ukrainian fight for independence. Sing, Serbal Ukraine, sing, little bird. The spring you're waiting for will come. Brazilian academic Henrique Coelho Neto wrote after the premiere of Shtadrik in Rio de Janeiro. But Ukrainians had to wait for a while for their spring. Russian winter was raining on their land. The Kremlin was continuing to erase Ukrainian intelligentsia, starve Ukrainian peasants, and consistently destroying anything that could remind the world of Ukraine. However, Shtadrik preserved the memory of its homeland. In 1936, the American composer and conductor of Ukrainian descent, Peter J. Wilhowsky, added Shtadrik to the repertoire of his school choir and presented the song on the popular NBC radio show. After the premiere, American music teachers bombarded Wilhowsky with requests to send the sheet music of Shtadrik. In November 1936, he published the song in the New York music publisher Carl Fischer Music, calling it Carol of the Bells. In the score, he notes, "This is a Ukrainian Christmas carol, music by Mykola Leontovich, lyrics and arrangement by Peter Wilhowsky." That's how a Ukrainian swallow turned into American bells, and Shtadrik became Carol of the Bells. The melody of Mykola Leontovich first became a Christmas anthem in the US and later in the entire world. To this tune, people play basketball, make movies, celebrate Christmas, and make content for TikTok. In the UK, Shtadrik is sometimes called the New Year's Serenade. In Latin America, a song of great magic, and in Canada, a newly discovered sphinx. Why did the work of the Ukrainian composer become so popular? This melody is timeless. It spans from the times of paganism, when the surrounding nature was a source of people's inspiration, to the era of American Hollywood. It graced box office hits such as Harry Potter, Die Hard, The Immortal Simpsons, and many, many more. Even among Ukrainians, very few people knew about the true origin of this masterpiece and its important cultural and political mission. Many heard the song for the first time in the Home Alone movie, released in 1990. For almost a century, Shtadrik lived across the Atlantic, where the song became a Christmas anthem, uniting people in their faith. 100 years later, a missile of those same Russian occupiers hit a residential building in Kyiv, located on Alexander Koshit Street. Russia is attempting to replay its absurd record about denazification and the lack of grounds for Ukrainian statehood. But this time, the world has no doubts in Ukraine's sovereignty, owing, among other things, to Shtadrik's contribution a century ago. The foundation of cultural diplomacy created by Simon Petliura remains a pillar for today's successes. Ukrainian songs and culture in general continue bringing new victories that enforce and supplement gains in other areas, diplomatic and military, to help Ukrainians defend their home and secure the main victory, the victory of life over death, freedom's triumph over subjugation.